before we look into the reasons why they rejected the ruling, now, as a political party, when he says their lawyer, he's saluting the doggedness of their lawyers to expose the rot in the system, okay, that's fair. He's speaking for their team, no doubt about that. But when you say that you're going to give us an aftermath of what you're going to do, these lawyers are not just children. Most of them are senior advocates of Nigeria. Now, some of the issues that the tribunal brought forth, technically speaking, do you think that some of this team of lawyers ought to have foreseen or known that these are some of the areas that the learned silks will be coming from, and do something to actually mitigate that in terms of working for their party, their clients, the Labour Party, that is?
Well, the beautiful and excellent thing about the legal profession, which I belong, proudly so, is that that we're learned doesn't also mean that we're infallible, just like the judges would say. The point of view they may look at something, right, may be different from the point of view of another. So it is not to imagine that if a senior advocate of Nigeria got into a matter and then he lost the matter, then it meant that he didn't know what he was doing. He was convinced and believed in his assessment of what he's done, and then the positions he was canvassing as being true and correct to the best of his understanding of the law and then application of the law and his knowledge. And then the judges are there to examine and review the positions of counsel and then all that has been presented before them.
All right.
And then make a finding and come one way or the other. They may depart from the way you view things. It doesn't really mean that you don't understand the law or that they have become perfect. The same way, the judges may also come through with a judgment. It doesn't also mean that they are super perfect. Okay?
All right.
They may mistake in the apprehension or understanding or interpretation of some law on some position. And that's why they too, whether before the Supreme Court, are not final because they are infallible. But especially for the Supreme Court that is even final, they are final not because they don't make mistakes, but because they are the final court.
All right.
So the justices have given their position. And that's why those who are dissatisfied with the outcome of the decision are saying, okay, we will review the decision of the court and then see if we can approach the Supreme Court for review.
All right, let's look at their reasons for rejecting the Presidential Election Court's judgment against its presidential candidate, Mr. Peter Obi. So, following the Presidential Election Petition Court's judgment that was dismissed, where they dismissed the allegation by the Labour Party and its candidate, Mr. Peter Obi, that the 2020 presidential election was rigged in favor of President Bola Tinubu, the court in its preliminary ruling that was delivered by Justice Abba Mohammed held that Obi and the Labour Party did not, by way of credible evidence, establish their allegation that election that held on February 25th was characterized by manifest corrupt practices. Similarly, the court also dismissed the allegation that President Bola Tinubu was convicted in the United States of America on a drug trafficking-related case. The court in its lead judgment in the joint petition that was filed by the Labour Party and its candidate, Mr. Peter Obi, held that evidence before it established that $460,000 fine that was imposed on Tinubu in the U.S. was in the civil matter. In view of all of this, Labour Party, through its National Publicity Secretary, spoke, which was what we saw. Now, a critical part of what came out of this judgment on all fronts yesterday is when the learned Silk said that INEC is free to determine the mode of transmission of results. If you look back at the ongoing incident at the International Conference Center on the day they were declaring the results, on the eve of Wednesday 1st, now the Kogi State governorship candidate, Senator Dino Melaye, and other party agents who were there said, hey, we don't understand what is going on here. What your agents gave us, what we saw at the polling units and your agent gave us at the polling units are not the same thing as to what we saw that is playing out here. Can you check this to ensure that it's better correct? Before the elections, these people came out full force, told Nigerians how that's INEC and Professor Mahmoud Yakubu from Chatham House to everywhere they could find, oh, this is a game changer, the beavers and all of that. If you may, when the justices say that they can actually, INEC can determine module of transmission of results, if what we were going to be getting in 2023 as a result, final result is status quo, where there are no electronic devices, where there are no digital transmission of results. In 2019, they told us that they didn't have a server, even when that was curious. And we're like, how do you even say you run a system and you don't have it? Okay, we'll let that go. Now there is a law they gave to us, and everybody was excited and went to the polls. And now you're coming out to say they are, even with all the, we're talking about hundreds of billion naira here invested in getting these devices. And then you come out to say that they are free to, even though we have, please help us understand how tenable this is.
This is one aspect that interests me really, and it interests me because I'm a citizen of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and I require answerability and accountability to resources of state. Now, and decisions really that would also affect the resources of state. The Independent National Electoral Commission, established under Section 153 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and of course Section 1 of the Electoral Act 2022. No doubt, there's no argument that the Commission has the responsibility to conduct, coordinate, and supervise elections in this country. And by extension, they have vested in them the power to set the procedure and, if you like, guidelines for conduct of these elections. Now, some would say, just as the justice, that's where, with respect, I would differ a bit with justice. The extent to which INEC will have the free latitude, right, the freedom to organize and coordinate elections with respect to determining the procedure and how elections should go will end at some point. And what's that point, to the best of my knowledge, or my view, will end at the point they have set down the procedure. So meaning that we allow you have the latitude to decide without any interference by any individual, any authority, as an independent, one of the independent federal agencies established under Section 153, that what is this freedom? Design the procedure, the regulation, or forms, any what you like, documents or procedure, however you want to organize the election. Free, stay in your closet, in your office, your head office and all your state branches and all your local government offices. Do that, nobody's interfering. But when you are done so and you've come out to say, now we're done, nobody interfered with us, this is how the election is going to go. This is the manual for the conduct of this election. This is what we require of the Nigerian state for us to be able to conduct this election. This is the regulation to regulate everybody. This is the criteria for the conduct of elections. And then you've done that. You've come up with your regulation and you present to Nigerians. Now, when you present to Nigerians, it will mean that you are bound by it. That's the point, that if I were one of those justices, this is the Electoral Act. You're bound by the Electoral Act. And if the Electoral Act and this Constitution vested power in you on INEC, and the Electoral Act further give you responsibility to set the criteria and then the regulation, and you've come up with your regulation, which is not here. You've come up with your guidelines for the election. You had discussions with the political parties. You made it public to all Nigerians. You presented it to the political parties, IPAC and all of that. You met several times. You've presented to the entire world, like you mentioned, Chatham House in the UK and elsewhere, even in conferences in Nigeria, that this is what the Nigerian Constitution and the Electoral Act enabled us to do freely. We have got that freedom. We have designed this. This is how it's going to go. Now we have presented it to Nigerians. And you know what? In law, when you cause a person to shift a position by reason of your representation, and he relies on that, especially by your expertise, by your knowledge, by what you have power to do, and you cause people to shift position, you are held liable to it. So it should also apply that we rely on INEC as the only institution of government to coordinate our elections, to design how best we could have elections, to come out with regulations and guidelines on how we get the best election. The best election is what we want. Then we have given you the power to do so. You have finished your work and you've come to us and said you have come with that. Whatever you present to us, now the next is for us to shift our position, isn't it? Now Nigerians that would have not come out to vote, Nigerians that may not expend any money to move from point A to point B because they want to go and vote, rely 100% on that representation, convinced that they're going to have a credible election, committed resources and time. Some lost their lives, and then they came out to it, and then they relied on that representation. not just coming out to it, they started by giving you money to enable you carry out that representation. That is to say, you say, give us 340, 350 billion naira so that we can deploy this technology that will enable us get credible election for Nigerians. The latitude, the leverage is the point of your conceptualizing this technology. Nobody interfered. So if anybody says INEC has the unlimited power to decide how to conduct elections, I would imagine that that's where it should stop. So then we've given you money, we've given you money, we've budgeted, you have expended money on what you think that is reasonable. If it is not important, it's not reasonable, and you expended our billions into it, and then you turn around to tell us, by the way, we dumped it. In fact, it is not important. In fact, we are not mandated to use it. Then you should account for that money.
All right. In just 2 minutes, now, from this judgment, Nigerians are feeling deceived. We are asking, like you said, where is our money? What should be the responsibility of citizens right now? Because violence is never a solution to anything, legally speaking.
Well, citizens have no choice but to abide by the law, to conduct themselves most orderly.
But INEC owe us an explanation somehow.
Yes, apparently they do. But yes, citizens can call for responsibility and answerability.
Okay.
We have representatives in the National Assembly.
Okay.
We have elected president, elected government. If we put the pressure on our government, if it's a responsible government that listens to the people, and then through the civil society organizations, through other pressure groups, and Nigerians say, if this is what it is, and you knew this was going to be what it is, if it wasn't that important to be mandatory, why expend this much money? If you knew you were going to go back and even the courts are going to make it legitimate that what we had. And what's the essence of review of the 2010 Electoral Act to get the 2022? Is that there were mischiefs in the 2010 Electoral Act. There were limitations to it. And Nigerians cried out what those limitations were. If there was no other one, at least, the fact that Nigerians felt that whenever they conducted the elections and they voted in point A, and that the materials and the results would be taken to point B, whereas they would decide what numbers of votes, that they were not satisfied because there were usually disruptions and, if you like, manipulations between the point of voting, where if somebody got 5, and before it got to that other place, it became 7. And they didn't want this period, this gap, to continue to mar the electoral process and diminish the credibility of the outcome of our elections. Then Nigerians cried out. Civil society organizations, human rights organizations, including mine, we got involved in this process and we came out with the Electoral Act to at least deploy electronics. And then INEC were given the opportunity to say, give us a solution to this. And they came up with this. That, look, if you finish voting here, it's their guideline. It will be transmitted right from there. So that the purpose of collation, like the laws, the judiciary, is sickening, really. Whatever you want to interpret in terms of collation, collate what is in the IREV. It's transmitted from here to that point, print it out and collate it. So that it won't be different with what we have. Then you say, no, it was not transmitted, and somebody tells us that they were not mandated to transmit.
All right.